Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. Black Ops 4 had two betas, one where you could play the normal multiplayer modes and another a few weeks later where you could play Blackout, the new Battle Royale mode. You can find links to my netcode analysis videos for each of these betas in the description down below, which you should have a look at, as this video here today is just an update video that focuses on the changes that were done since the beta. The reason why I test beta versions of a game is to show you how well that game works at that point in its development, which many players want to know when they decide if they should buy the game at launch. Another reason is to get data that I can then compare the final version of the game to, so that I can tell you if the developers made any improvements. So when I tested the first beta of Black Ops 4, where you could only play the normal multiplayer, I found that just like in Call of Duty World War II, the game server sent 60 updates per second to the clients, which meant that it most likely also did 60 simulations per second. However, the Black Ops 4 beta provided network delays that were lower than the ones in World War II, so the developers did make improvements here compared to the previous title. The performance of the Blackout beta was sadly not as good, as the server struggled under the load of more than 80 players. And so they were unable to send more than 10 updates per second to the clients during the early phase of the match, an issue that the Unreal Engine had as well, which Fortnite and PUBG had to deal with for a very long time. The server's inability to send 60 updates per second to the players caused that the Blackout game mode had about twice the network delay of the normal multiplayer. However, since these two betas were weeks apart, it seemed like most players did not notice the difference. But I was sure that after release, many players would notice this quite massive difference, because then they could jump from the 60Hz normal multiplayer into Blackout and back again. So during the last week I've tested the game again to see if the developers were able to improve the send rate of the server in Blackout. I guess that the developers do not want others to take a look at the network data, because they still kill the game client as soon as you launch Wireshark. And they really forcefully kill the game client, because when you launch it again, then you get that notification that the game did not close properly and you might want to launch it in safe mode. However, if you know what you are doing, then that measure does not stop you from looking at the network data. So when we take a look at the send rate of the server during a solo match in Blackout, then we see that the server sends 40 updates per second to the client when the match starts, which is a massive improvement compared to the beta. However, the send rate of the server is not stable and eventually drops down to 20 Hz. This is a bit confusing, because usually you see the server of a Battle Royale game increase its send rate over time, as fewer players mean less stress on the server. So I'm not sure why the send rate of the server here gets lower as fewer players are left. However, this still seems a lot better than what we had in the beta, so let's take a look at the network delays. As I said before, the beta of the normal multiplayer ran at 60 Hz, but had less delay than Call of Duty World War II, which also ran at 60 Hz, which means that the developers managed to improve the networking. But Blackout sadly had twice the network delay of the normal multiplayer, as the server just couldn't handle the stress of that high player count. In the final version, the developers managed to improve the send rate of the server, but the delays are sadly still quite high in the Battle Royale mode, with next to no difference when compared to the beta. Now, how about the normal multiplayer mode, which did perform quite well in the beta? This one now has as much delay as Blackout. And the reason behind this is very simple. The developers lowered the send rate of the server from 60 Hz to just 20 Hz, as you can see here in these captures done with Wireshark. Why would the developers make such a massive downgrade when not only the beta ran nicely at 60 Hz, but also Call of Duty World War II had no issues with a 60 Hz server send rate? I don't know why the developers made such a massive step backwards. All I do know is that if they would not have done that, then players would have surely noticed that the normal 60Hz multiplayer had much less delay than the 20Hz Blackout. But that downgrade does not only affect how long you must wait until you get a hit marker, or how far behind cover you get hit. How many packets per second you get from the server also directly affects if you receive each individual bullet that hits you. Or if you get hit by super bullets, which I explained in detail in my Netcode 101 video, which you can find a link to in the description down below. Basically, if a game features weapons which use a very high rate of fire, then you want a high simulation rate on your server to avoid that multiple bullets get put into a single update, and then have players die in a single frame from what seems like a single shot that dealt way more damage than this gun is capable of. Even if 20 Hz are enough to have at least one packet for each fired bullet of your highest rate of fire gun, you still have to consider that players are affected by packet loss. And at just 20 packets per second, even minor packet loss can quickly result in very noticeable issues for the player, which is why first-person shooters usually use 60 Hz or 60 updates per second. Competitive shooters even have servers send 120 or 128 packets per second. So after this massive downgrade to just 20 Hz, it is no surprise that players are unhappy with their online experience. And it doesn't help that the developers continue to refuse to enable the network performance icons, which will tell you about a connection issue to the server. Icons that are already in the game and were available in the beta of Call of Duty World War II, but didn't make it into the final game for some reason. The game also massively favors the shooter, no matter how bad his connection to the server is. And what experience this will cause for a player who has a good connection to the server. That said, in its current state, even when both players have a ping of just 25 milliseconds to the server, you still get damage behind cover because of how bad the network delay is. Now, please don't get me wrong. I know that many developers and publishers do not care about providing servers in all regions they sell their games in, which is why many players have no other choice than to play at more than 100 or 150 milliseconds ping. That is simply unacceptable, because when they sell you an online multiplayer game, then they must also ensure that they can provide you with low latency servers for your location so that you get a good experience. But at the same time, it's also unacceptable to have players with a decent connection to the server get a bad online experience just because they get shot by someone who has a bad connection to the server. But if you watched my Netcode 101 video, then you know that there is a way how this issue can be mitigated. So the network delay is quite frankly terrible in Call of Duty Black Ops 4, because the engine is not yet optimized to run Blackout at a high enough tick rate, and the developers decided to run the normal multiplayer at 20 Hz as well, even though it ran at 60 Hz during the beta, and World War II still runs at 60 Hz as well. But does this also apply to the PlayStation 4 version of this game? When we take a look at the network data that are captured by using port mirroring on my Switch, we can see a 20 Hz server send rate and a 60 Hz client send rate in the normal multiplayer on the PlayStation 4. And in Blackout we also get those 40 Hz when the match starts, and then the server send rate decreases to 20 Hz as the match progresses. Same goes for the PlayStation 4 Pro. So in terms of the networking, there does not seem to be a difference between PC, the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Pro. One thing that is missing on console though are the ping values inside the scoreboard. On the PlayStation you do not even get the usual signal strength indicators. Now, if you've seen my Netcode 101 video, then you know how I measure the delay that two players experience in an online multiplayer game. For Black Ops 4 I used two PlayStation 4 Pros to do the exact same test on that platform. Now, the results were obviously going to be worse than on PC, because on console games are locked at 60 FPS and you cannot disable VSync. Also, these tests were done on gaming monitors, which means that if you are playing on a TV which does not have a game mode or generally low input lag, then you can probably add about 100 milliseconds to the values that you see here. But I did not include these results here to make the PlayStation look bad. What I want to do is provide players on the PlayStation with facts about the delay that they are affected by, and grow a separate results chart just for the console version of the multiplayer games that I'm going to test in the future, so that you know how good or bad the delays are when compared to other games. But it's not all bad news. During the time that I played the game on PC and the PlayStation 4, I was always placed on the dedicated server and never experienced a host migration. I've also heard from players in India, the Middle East as well as South Africa that Black Ops 4 uses data centers there, which is great for players who live there. I also noticed that when I played on a dedicated server, then Black Ops 4 no longer reveals the IP addresses of the other players, which is also a great change. And that's pretty much all that I have for you in this update video about the netcode in Call of Duty Black Ops 4. I'm very disappointed by Activision and the developers that they silently lowered the server send rate from 60 to just 20 Hz in the normal multiplayer. And I'm really curious how they are going to explain that massive downgrade. If you are a Call of Duty fan, then you should not simply accept this downgrade, nor should you settle with the 20 Hz that Blackout is running at right now. If you truly love this franchise, then you want Black Ops 4 to be as good as it possibly can be. So you should tell the developers and Activision that this is simply unacceptable and that you want them to do better and make this the best Call of Duty that ever existed. And that's all for today. I will keep you updated on the progress that the developers make, and if you enjoyed this updated netcode analysis of Black Ops 4, then it would be great if you could support me on Patreon. Without the awesome support that I get from my patrons, I simply couldn't do such massive tests on multiple platforms. You can find a link to my Patreon in the description down below, where you will also find links to my social accounts in case that you want to stay up to date on the videos that I'm working on. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris, and this was Battle Nonsense.